Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The 2024 NFL draft season is upon us. The boys have been in the lab the last couple of weeks building our position ranks. And Dill, we're starting off with an absolutely loaded wide receiver class heading into this 2024 NFL draft. And I was looking at some of my notes, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was my number one wide receiver in last year's class. And I don't even think he'd be a top 5 wide receiver for me in this 2024 class. It's a loaded group. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. And for the longtime listeners, many of you guys know the NFL draft, one of our favorite things to talk about, stacking these players, doing mock drafts. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, and again, the special aspect about the NFL draft, there are so many different opinions. Would love to hear your position rankings, your wide receivers, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Let's get it going in the comment section. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. And Dill, starting off with the number 10 wide receiver in this class. And you'd probably classify this as like a my guy. Tory Horton, coming from Colorado State. And you talk about a smooth operator. He's not necessarily going to run the fastest 40. He's not going to measure and test exceptionally well at the NFL Combine. But you take a look at the wide receivers that are having the most success in the NFL right now. It's the guys who are smooth, who know how to create separation, run the routes. Tory Horton, checks all those boxes. He's got a nice catch radius. He knows how to get open, knows how to play the wide receiver position. Tory Horton, you're probably not going to see him in a lot of top 10 NFL wide receiver rankings. Tory Horton's my guy coming in at 10.
And honestly, what kind of stands out is just the ability to beat zone coverage with his mind and his understanding, if they're in a cover two, to kind of get in that middle and sit in the middle, not run into the safeties and some of that other stuff he does. Because, again, that's where he kind of made his, hey, it was working that middle of the field, being a savvy player. The one thing you're probably going to wonder is how good he's going to be against, like, pure man coverage, because that, you're kind of right. The physical traits don't necessarily pop off at you. But as kind of your number 3 guy, maybe on an NFL, maybe a number 2 guy who you want to be a bit of a zone beater. He's really got it because, again, just got that knack for the position. And you do see that type of guy like really work out. A Julian Edelman, really, really savvy route runner, really knows kind of what to do against each coverage and just does it really quickly. Tory Horton's kind of got a little bit of that savvy in him.
And he's a little slender. So, like, some of the concerns at 6'2", 190, like, how well does he deal with some physicality at the line of scrimmage? And Dill, caught for over 1,000 yards in 2023, but was not a part of a Colorado State offense that, kind of stunk. And so you slot Tory Horton in more of like a prolific offense. I think this is a guy that's putting up some insane numbers. And again, the jump from the group of 5 to the NFL is certainly a question, but kind of just trust the tape. And you said it best, like understanding the position. Tory Horton, a guy that's just going to be a really quality wide receiver at the next level. Now, getting into number 9, and Dill, I'm going to take some heat for this one. And I know you're going to give me a lot of heat too. Brian Thomas Jr., you can lay it on me, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts.
You just don't see many guys like him come around, and I get it. Maybe just 1 year of production and maybe not ultra versatile. He's good at what he's good at, and that's getting downfield, catching the ball, tracking the ball, and making contested catches. But frankly, that's a big-time weapon in pro football when you're a guy who can score as many big plays, or make those big plays at the clip he does it. And I just don't think you have that many guys. You're looking, it's a deep wide out room. And again, you're kind of like when you look at him versus Keon Coleman or some of these other guys who will be up there, it is maybe a little like, you'll have an argument, but man, this does feel a little low for a guy with this type of unique skill set.
Yeah, I think he's extremely talented, and you guys will probably get, and I know, Dill, me and you go back and forth in this conversation. The wide receivers that I've valued, and I've been burned too many times on the vertical threats and kind of buying into some of those highlight tapes and not looking enough about like how does this wide receiver operate on a down-to-down basis. And I just don't think he's a good enough separator to be kind of considered a top 5 wide receiver for me. Like you said it best, vertical ball skills, contested catch. He's absolutely insane, and he's very good in the red zone. This is, to an extent, it's not as me not liking Brian Thomas Jr. as much as just liking a lot of other wide receivers a little bit more. In terms of my guys, my cup of tea at wide receiver, I want a guy that can separate. I want a guy that's a clean route runner, and I want someone who can excel after the catch. You look at the NFL and the receivers that are having a lot of success. If you are dangerous after the catch, I mean, I love that in wide receivers. And Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, 11 missed forced tackles on the year. I wish that would be a little bit better. So for those reasons, Brian Thomas Jr. just a little bit lower than most people would have him. I would love to hear the comments on this one. And we'll go back and forth. And I totally, if you want to tell me Brian Thomas Jr. is a top 5 wide receiver, would totally understand where you're coming from. Dill, number 8. And this one, I mean, this is your guy, so I'm going to let you cook here, and then I'll give you some of my takes. Andria Smith at Texas A&M. You talk about a guy that gets open. Here you go.
I mean, if you're the type of college football fans that we are, and obviously that's kind of, I mean, that's what we do on Saturdays. You just watch 16 games college football or whatever you do. You kind of have an appreciation for him because, again, he's not going to jump off in terms of he doesn't look like a Brian Thomas. He doesn't look like a Keon Coleman. He's obviously going to come in smaller. But, man, you just look at a guy who's wildly dependable, has been dependable now, it feels like, for 3 or 4, or at least 3 years, it feels like.
Yes.
But just a guy who, again, just is open, makes plays after the catch, just a rock, I think, will be just play for a really long time. This is kind of your guy. And just how
you
important
said he's
was
small.
that?
The thing with Andria Smith that I love is he is yoked up, like 200 pounds, and I believe it, right? 5'10". He weighs as much as Brian Thomas Jr., who's 6'4". He's kind of got that running back build. And you talk about separators. And again, that's kind of what I look for. His movement skills are off the chart. Like before the catch and after the catch, him creating separation on nickels, safeties, that's where he excels. And then when he catches the football and has room to operate, that is where he's most dangerous. You take a look at like him doing punt returns and a guy that just is making people miss 20 missed forced tackles on the year. Over half of his receiving yards came after the catch. And so those are kind of my guys. Now
that sense when he catches the ball of where to go. Yeah. He goes to the right spots. He gets his first downs. I mean, just again, you kind of talk like one of those quarterback best friend type of guys. He's kind of it.
35 and like that Texas A&M offense for the time that he was there. Again, not great when good things were happening. When they needed a play, they were going to a guy like Smith. Now, some downsides of Smith. One is obviously 5-time the catch radius. It's not necessarily there. And he's probably only going to be in the slot. And again, if you're looking for a first-round wide receiver in the draft, you probably want a guy that can move around and be dangerous all over. Smith's probably not going to be a guy that is going to be a boundary weapon. But you talk about, and I think the emphasis on having very good slot wide receivers is as high as it's ever been in the NFL. I think this is a guy that is dependable. Now, he's had some injuries in the past. You want to make sure those medicals check out. Nah, Smith's highlight tape. I could watch it all day if you needed me to. Now, going to number 7, Dill, and another guy that is not going to be a guy that takes over the combine and the tight pants. He's not going to be an underwear, what do they call it, an underwear Olympics champ, but a guy that you talk about getting the job done, and I might be fighting to get Ladd McConkey maybe even to that top 5. You talk about understanding the position, the ability to create separation, kind of the same things we talked about with Tory Horton. I mean, Ladd McConkey has done it for a long time at the biggest stage of college football. I'm a huge fan of Ladd McConkey.
And you talk just the guy who's beaten man coverage probably at a higher clip than some of these other guys. When we talk about like those savvy route runners, I mean, he's that for sure. But beats man coverage pretty consistently, it felt like, at Georgia. I also think, frankly, you're sleeping on how he's going to test. I think, again, when I watch him kind of burst, very good acceleration, really can get going. I mean, does well with the ball after the catch. I think he's going to test a little better than you think. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a little higher up on teams' boards than this. Because, again, didn't have a ton of time in his junior year because he was hurt a lot. But I did really like what you saw. I thought the routes were really good. He could get open downfield. I think he's kind of got some of that like really solid player in him with a much higher upside.
And you look at all the offensive weapons he's been on Georgia with, right? Obviously, Brock Bowers for the last 3 years, but you've had A.D. Mitchell, you have George Pickens. Like, there's a reason the Georgia quarterbacks, whether it's Carson Beck, whether it's Stetson Bennett, they're going to Ladd McConkey. Like, he's a guy that is just reliable. He doesn't drop passes. That stuff plays at the NFL level. I think Ladd McConkey makes that transition seamlessly. A guy that is not a Keon Coleman to talk about, right? He's not going to have the crazy highlight tapes in terms of the circus catches, but a guy that's going to get the job done. Now, going to 6 still, and one of our personal favorites, and I don't know if it's prospect fatigue, and I maybe it kind of fell short of what you wanted from him in that 2023 season, but I mean, one thing you can't teach is the acceleration, the long speed. But for Xavier Worthy, I feel like the narrative around him as a prospect is he's just a straight line guy. I And there's a reason he's an elite punt returner. There's a reason that they're throwing him 4 screens a game. He is elite with the ball in his hands. His twitch is absolutely out of this world. That type of stuff that you can't teach. Now, he wants to clean up some of that stuff that we'll talk about, physicality, contested catches. But you talk about some intangibles, some stuff that's just special with Xavier Worthy. I mean, he's got it.
I mean, you're kind of right. You just like when you're watching him, you just see a different level of speed. I mean, when he catches a ball and you're not right on him, it's very, very dangerous because if you give him a crack, he's going to the house. In that in itself, really big time. But I also think, again, you kind of started to catch the ball a little bit better than he did. I think he struggled in 2022, came back in 23 and really was more consistent catching the ball, didn't have as many drops. I still would like to see him track deep balls a little bit better than he does sometimes because, again, when you're that type of player, you kind of got to take advantage of when you get a shot to make those plays. But I also, frankly, think Quinn Ewers at Texas missed him on a lot, and he could have a much bigger stat sheet if maybe he had better quarterback play for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I another kind of knock on Xavier Worthy that I don't know if I necessarily agree with is that his route running isn't as clean as you would like it to. And there's probably an argument to that, but I think the argument more lies with he can do more with his route running. Like he has the twitch, he has the movement skills, he has the ability to throttle it down and throttle it up kind of with ease. Like you can teach that. That can happen at the NFL level. So he has everything that you want. Now, again, the knocks on Xavier Worthy are like the physicality. Like I think he's a better athlete than a guy like Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee last year. Like Jalen Hyatt, really, the reason I was low on him is just a vertical guy. And you didn't really see much else. Xavier Worthy's not just a vertical guy, and it kind of drives me crazy to see people get up and say he's only has long speed. And I think he's got a lot more than that. And so your questions are, can he deal with press? But I think his movement skills are going to allow him to do so. And again, the contested catch being physical, the overall physicality, like even in blocking, like run blocking, he's just not really interested in that. He doesn't have the body to. You want to see him clean that type of stuff up. But again, the goal in the NFL is to hit those explosive plays. Xavier Worthy's going to let you do it.
I mean, he again, you just like he's got that like Tyreek Hill feel at times where it's just like,
yeah.
We kind of talk like there's those guys in college who just look different, and then there's Tyreek Hill pretty much alone in how he looks at the pro level. You definitely see that with him at college. Again, just such a freaky athlete with that twitchiness and that long speed combination where he can get going to 0 to 100 pretty much immediately. I mean, again, route running, he ultimately always commands some sort of cushion. He's open a lot. He made a lot of plays at Texas. I think people are like kind of, again, I think it's kind of what you said. It's a bit of prospect fatigue. He's been really good for a long time. Maybe he's underperformed to an extent, but I think part of that is quarterback play. And again, part of that is things that I think are fixable, like hands. But
I think the reason you see him, like you started as him, like some people had him as wide receiver 1 in summer scouting. And I think the reason you're seeing his stock take a little bit of a dive is he probably didn't live up to the expectations of that year 3 of his college football year. But I think all the things that you loved about him in summer scouting, which had him as a wide receiver 1, it's still there. And so I'm kind of trusting the traits that Xavier Worthy brings to the table. Now, Dill, very polarizing prospect. I have a lot of thoughts on Keon Coleman. You wanted him higher in these rankings. I wanted him lower. We settled at 5. Dill, I'll give you the floor first, and then I'll get after you here.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious part, I know what people are going to say is just not being necessarily that Malik Neighbors type of route runner. But again, I think you've seen enough moments where like that LSU game to be able to catch that quick slant and make that move in that type of quick succession. Like those are the type of things you want to see. I think he moves, frankly, better through the middle of the field than people think. And again, just talking about things that just are unteachable and are wildly unique to him, probably got the best hands in this draft and the ability to make contested catches. I don't even know if it's close. I mean, this guy's going to be a weapon. I think you've seen him return punts even. So I think he moves a little better than you all think. I don't know if he should necessarily be higher because I think the top 3 are the top 3 and they're the best. But it gets really tight here. He could easily be 4 in my mind.
Back and forth with Keon Coleman. Like you turn on the highlights of Keon Coleman and it's this guy's a first-round NFL draft pick. And then you turn on some film with stretches of the season. Now, I think a lot of the NFL, I think the scouts who are doing work for the NFL certainly realize it. Maybe the more NFL fans who are tapping into the NFL draft content, maybe not, really banged up all year. This was a guy that missed a lot of and then like was playing through a lot of injuries. My take on Keon Coleman is I want to be careful of falling in love with the highs and not recognizing that the lows can be low. I mean, he really does struggle to separate. You see him make all those crazy contested catches. I think a lot of that is a result of him just not creating separation. So there's a ton of things to love about Keon Coleman, but the overall route running nuance and the ability to separate leaves a little bit to be desired. And that's a massive red flag. Now, the thing that I would, if you wanted to argue Keon Coleman higher, why I would agree is that you see the movement skills. Like, this is not a guy that is like stiff in the hips, because you see him as a punt returner. You see him after the catch show, a very, very good movement skills. And then you just want to see that translate to his route running, which you don't necessarily see. Really good with the ball after his hands, not great with the foot, not great before the catch. And so can you kind of harness those movement skills and kind of teach them a little bit more about running routes and creating separation?
Right. At the end of the day, to be that size and move the way he does, to return punts at the level he does, it's like
freak.
It's kind of there, but you're right. You want to see catches over the middle of the field more consistently. You want to see him be able to kind of, again, like what we're going to talk about with those top three guys. They run every route in the book. They can get downfield. They can catch the ball really well. You kind of want to see him broaden or complete his game probably to an extent.
100%. Number 4. And I think in a lot of years, this is probably where I would have Troy Franklin goes in the NFL draft last year. Dill, I think I have Troy Franklin as the wide receiver 1. Yeah. And it hurts me to see him at 4. And I think that just speaks to how good I think the top 3 receivers in this class are. I think he's a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. And you take a look at Troy Franklin, what he brings to the table. Vertical speed's insane, right? 6'3", 190 pounds. Works vertically exceptionally well, tracks football as well, runs exceptionally clean routes for his size. It is rare to see someone with the catch radius and frame of Troy Franklin and also have the ability to separate. He's a guy that catches everything, was extremely reliable for Bo Nix the last 2 years. And I think the only one question that you have is, dealing with some physicality at the next level. And you see a lot of NFL wide receivers sometimes struggle with that. Is Troy Franklin going to struggle with that? If he does, that's probably your big concern, is that lack of physicality and probably not really being able, because he's been that way the whole 3 years at Oregon, right? It's like that is who he is. He's not going to be a guy. And I think you get the biggest arguments here. And this is kind of a side note. You remember the conversation with Devonta Smith, needs to gain weight. He would have gained weight if he could gain weight. That's just his body. He doesn't really have the capability to put on much weight, and you don't want to lose those movement speed or that movement skill. So I think Troy Franklin's going to stay around 190, but I just love the film, and I think this guy has exceptional ability to work down the field.
In one thing I think is huge, and again, it's kind of like when you watch it, you feel it, is he's got that innate chemistry with Bo Nix, and just that, again, that understanding. And when they needed a play, it was going to him. And even though pretty much most teams knew it, because again, Oregon had solid wide receivers around him, but there was no one really in his world. Like Rome Odunze at Washington, they had 2 other legitimate NFL players right next to him. So you kind of had a broader group. Troy Franklin's been the guy for 2 years now. And again, they're able to just be on point. They run the route. When he breaks out, the ball's there. They're hitting their spots. He's getting to where he needs to get to on time. And again, I don't think that's something I think, again, you get it by watching. You get it by a feel. I just feel like that with him. And one thing I'll say about his physicality and some of those questions, if you look at the way he releases off the football, I think that should maybe lessen some of the concerns, because he gets off the ball really well. When guys try to press him, he just takes the top off because he is so good with his release.
And again, going back to the people who were concerned about Jalen Hyatt, you didn't see a ton of nuance in terms of how he could get off the ball. He never really had to deal with any press because Tennessee kind of that scheme.
And he also never had to be the guy. Troy Franklin was the guy. It's like they knew they were going to stick Jabbar Muhammad on him against Washington, and it was like you had to go beat him enough times to move this football.
And one last thing to close on Troy Franklin, they'll average 17 yards per catch. That's incredible. When he was targeted at a 72% completion percentage. That's an incredible stat in terms of you're working vertically down the field and the quarterback is completing 72% of his footballs to you on 17 yards per catch. Incredible number, incredible player. Unfortunately, it's not in the top 3 of this draft class because the top 3 is loaded. And this is where I'm really interested in hearing what people think. Top 3, you could tell me really any combination you want and I'll listen to it. We have Malik Neighbors at 3. And I think the one thing that is probably separating him from maybe an obviously a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., who you could argue is in his own class, is probably not going to test exceptionally well. Malik Neighbors, probably the long speed working vertically is not quite there in terms of separating vertically. But man, you talk about understanding the position. The best route runner in this class, the short area quickness. I mean, he checks all those boxes. And again, going back to, it's easy to get sucked in to those circus highlight plays. Malik Neighbors just makes it look easy. His highlights aren't as fun as a guy like Keon Coleman, but there's a reason he was that productive, and there's a reason he's going to be phenomenal in the NFL, and that is he understands that wide receiver position just about as good as anyone in this class.
And that's what I was going to say. Again, some of those things we've talked about with guys like Smith or Horton, like some of those like savviness and that ability, he's pretty much got that. But again, I mean, you put like long speed, like some of those things as physical, or some of the physical traits as weaknesses. That's like, you're obviously just grasping with these top three guys.
100%.
You don't really have those weaknesses. Nothing glares out. I mean, he really can move very well, can make contested catches. There's just nothing wrong with his game. There's nothing wrong with the other two guys' games. These top three guys are just absolute hammers. And again, Malik Neighbors, you can't argue with the production because he was just insane, the numbers he was putting up.
I sat there last night trying to come up with like weaknesses for some of these wide receivers, and it took me hours. I was just like, I was grasping at air to find some sort of thing to put in the weakness.
Like, he's not going to be the premier physical freak athlete, but it's like, that's not saying he's not going to be a kind of a freak athlete.
He's like you look at the wide receivers that are excelling right now, a lot of them aren't the physical. Like Justin Jefferson did not come out and was like, oh, elite physical traits. Cooper Kupp certainly did not come out. I believe he ran like a 4.65. Like, these guys weren't like the elite physical traits, but they were just damn good at the position, and that translates to the NFL. Dill, number 2, and we're gonna have to get into a little bit of an argument here. Rome Odunze from Washington at 2. Dill is in the select few and a growing few that believe that Rome and Marvin Harrison Jr. might be in the kind of the same level. Dill, I'll let you have the opening arguments here.
I mean, I think there might be a bit of Ohio State's just a bigger program. They've been more successful the past 2 years. Obviously, Washington came around this year, and Odunze starting to get a shine. But I'm not 100% sure what Marvin Harrison actually does so much better than Odunze. And Odunze, I think, is far better with the ball in his hands after the catch. So again, I think when you're talking, it's really tight. Marvin Harrison maybe a little bit better body control in the ability to make those circus catches. But Odunze runs pretty much perfect routes, very, very savvy.
Dill, have you seen the narrative that Rome is not a good route runner? And I look at that and I just get like, he is at 6'3", 215 pounds. And maybe he's a little shorter and a little lighter, but this dude is a smooth operator, has a track background coming from high school. So I think I said physical testing ? Again, grasping at straws for the weakness. I wouldn't be surprised if he runs pretty well at the combine. And again, how smooth he is adjusting the footballs, making those contested catches. There are so many things that he checks off the box for it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my wide receiver 1, but like the Rome argument, I don't think is as outlandish as some people like to think it is.
He really can play every position, and that's what made Washington so dangerous, is all three of those guys could play slot, boundary, get downfield. He just like so versatile, so good at it, just like everything. There's no holes. He adds just an element into an offense that, again, it's really hard to deal with, because when you're a pure slot guy, that's okay if you're a really good slot, but it's better to be able to work out of the slot at that type of level and then go get downfield and make big time plays. Again, you're talking 3 guys who are just damn near perfect prospects at that wideout spot, and differentiating's hard. My only edge to Rome Odunze is I think that's the one place that it sticks out a little bit, is he is way better with the ball after the catch.
That's probably, I mean, that's the one thing.
He's really good in that screen game that I just don't think you saw a ton from Marvin Harrison.
That's true. I just don't know if Marv had as much opportunity in that kind of offense to excel after the catch than with what Kalen DeBoer and Rome Odunze and Michael Penix had. Getting to Marvin Harrison Jr., I mean, for me, the best wide receiver I've watched in college football, like truly special. You talk about, and you guys have all heard this, so we'll keep this one short. You talk about checking all the boxes. I mean, the size, the speed, the body control. I think his route running gets a little overshadowed because of how much of a freak he is. And Dill, his senior year, I think he actually put it on display. And I get the numbers weren't as incredible as it was last year, but you saw him as that wide receiver one, the guy that, I mean, Kyle McCord was just pretty much closing his eyes and throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. has developed a lot of nuance in his route running, like throttling down his speed, being able to sit it down in zone coverage. And again, that doesn't get talked enough about because you just talk about the physical traits, but he's a special blend of, I'm not just relying on being bigger, stronger, faster than the people that are trying to cover me, which I am, but he also is a guy that understands the position at an extremely high level. It makes sense. His dad was one of the best to do it because he was an elite route runner. You can tell Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't fall much far from the tree. He gets the position at a high level, but he combines it with just being an absolute freak show. You talk about a guy that's kind of just a surefire translator to the NFL. I mean, you're looking at it here with Marv.
Yeah, and again, and I might have Rome one, but it's certainly – I wouldn't argue with any of these top three guys, frankly. I think Malik Neighbors, if you put him one, I'd be perfectly fine with that. Marvin Harrison, you're right. I mean, and there might be a little bit of prospect fatigue with me and Marvin Harrison. Again, he didn't put up the numbers he put up last year. Obviously, I don't think that was really his fault. He went from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord, and there is a huge step because obviously C.J. Stroud looks like he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But Marvin Harrison, I mean, you're right. Just that ability to control his body up through the catch is like, that's almost one of those things, like almost blows your mind how sometimes he's able to jump, get his feet down, just magical ability to do that. And again, that's like when you talk about some of those skill sets that I'm not sure anyone's close, that skill set he's gotten, his ability to control himself on the sideline and when the ball's in the air, no one's really close to him.
Agreed. This is such a fun wide receiver class. And I think you're going to see, you look at the NFL draft and teams just prioritizing getting wide receivers on rookie deals. Like, you might see 6-7 wide receivers going.
I was looking at your like draft grade top number, like top 150 and so forth. I was like, well, we might have 7 guys, damn near 7 guys go in the first round. So you might be talking 10 guys in the top 60 or so.
Yeah, no, and and there's a bunch of guys that we didn't. I mean, Xavier Worhty, I'll mention him because he's a guy that you see in a lot of top 10s. He's the kind of the definition of me worrying about too much of, okay, he works vertically down the field exceptionally well. There's not much else. He's pretty one-dimensional in terms of just working vertically. 1 year of production. Not my cup of tea as a wide receiver, but you could certainly see an NFL team just have him walk into a meeting room. Okay, you're jacked up, muscle factory. You are running low 4.3s. We'll take it. You see some guys betting on the traits. He's a guy that I'm not as quite high on. A.D. Mitchell's another kind of buzz name that I just haven't seen enough consistency from him in a wide receiver class that is as loaded as it is with guys that are proven. I mean, some of them just aren't going to make the cut. I mean, 30 minutes, talked about 10 wide receivers. Would love to hear guys that you think
talk about 10 more easily, it feels like.
100%. You could talk about 10 more that are going to be NFL draft picks. Really, really loaded group. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. This weekend, we got the Edge rankings coming out. Would love for you guys to check that out as well. And would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. We have a blast doing this NFL draft stuff. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.